People with nightmare siblings. What's the most up thing they ever did? My brother is in prison for kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, evading arrest, attempted murder, possession of an illegal firearm, possession of a controlled substance, possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, manufacturing a controlled substance with intent to distribute, and as a cherry on top of the crap pile, abuse. Here's the truly messed up thing. The rest of the family was surprised it wasn't worse. Story 2. I was maybe 8 or 9 when this happened. For context, my dad was deployed and my mom was working, so my brother had to babysit me. My brother was around 16 at the time. As soon as my mom left, he shoved me into a closet and locked me inside for 6 or so hours. I was scared of the dark and couldn't reach the light string. He didn't let me out to use the bathroom or eat anything, so I ended up going on myself and sitting in the dark until my mom came home. She told me that he was asleep in his room when she got home. Needless to say, I really hate him. He's still an awful person. Story 3. While my mom was dying of lung disease, unable to move and in horrible pain, my junkie brother stole all of her opioid bandages. She even kept them under her pillow, so no one could have access to them. He would bend to kiss her and sneak his hand under to grab them. Story 4. It's hard to decide between him trying to strangle me in my sleep, him permanently ducking up my hip with a metal bat when I was 9, and him spending over an hour at my birthday dinner recounting every single story of him intentionally hurting me as a kid, most of which I had always thought were accidents, and getting everyone to laugh about it. Story 5. My older brother once sat on me and mummified me with duct tape and then left me outside in 30-degree weather while he played PS2 with headphones on. He taped my hands and feet together first and then the rest of me. I couldn't even fight back. I was left that way until our mom got home a few hours later and grounded the crap out of him. Story 6. He married a girl. Wedding had a lot of damn you to our family in it, but aside from those, announced at the wedding, we're pregnant. Turned out, about 4 months at that point, they had the baby. First, a month later, he announces, "It's too much, she's a git. I can't take this. I'm leaving and going to move in with a friend from work." Turns out friend from work is 8 months pregnant at this point with his next kid. By some miracle, he doesn't leave that girl when the baby is born, but asterisk gets her pregnant asterisk again, about as soon as is possible. I don't know if she wises up or something else at that point, but baby mama. Second, kicks him out then. Now he lives in my parents' basement, refuses to drive an hour to see his kids cause what good is that? One of those kids he spent their first month of life with and has seen about a dozen times since. The second, I think he spent the entire first, call it 10 months of their life together till mommy was knocked up again and hasn't seen since. And the third, he'd never seen. Story 7. Dropped a barbell, dumbbell 20 pounds, on my face while I was laying on the couch, breaking one of my front teeth and causing permanent jaw damage. And he wonders why even decades later, I want nothing to do with him. The first incident occurred when he was 7, the second when he was 14. They're just the highlights of a long series of dysfunctional psychopathic behavior. He did spend time in juvenile hall over the second incident. I've had no contact with him as an adult, so I don't know his fate during the interval. We are several years apart. Story 8. Spread his white liquid on my Popstar posters just to disturb me. Threw firecrackers in my bed while I was asleep in. It strangled me with a PS2 controller cord stole and pawned my belongings on a semi-regular basis. Killed our pet parrot by putting it in a closet with a space heater, beat our dog in front of me with no apparent reason, etc. Story 9. My brother is 5 years older than me. When he turned 12, my folks trusted him to watch me when they went out for short trips to the store, dinner, whatnot. When I was about 8, I got into a terrible fight with my brother one night when he was watching me. I think it started with something stupid. I wanted to watch a movie, and he wanted the living room and TV to watch something I thought was scary. He told me to duck off upstairs to my room. We almost always came to blows over everything. His reactions to arguments were always to get inches from your face and scream as loud as he could and puff up to intimidate. He 100% learned this from our father. He then would put hands on you if you stepped up to him, and I often did, and as I started to do to my father as well. That night we started screaming at each other, and he slapped me across the face. I was so shocked I fell on my ass and looked at him in disbelief. He'd split my lower lip. He hit me so hard. I started to cry and said I was going to call our grandmother, who lived about 30 minutes away. This was before cell phones, and I didn't think about calling my folks wherever they were. As soon as I stood to run to the phone, he grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and tried to keep me away from the phone. I screamed and tried to push him away, but he grabbed my hair with his other hand and forced me into the ground. He was behind me. His arms shifted into a bear hug, his legs wrapped around mine, and I couldn't move. I felt his arms shift, and one of his forearms went around my neck, and his opposite hand clasped over my mouth, and then my nose. We writhed like that, for what felt like a long time, but I clearly remember fading out and going dark. When I woke up, I was laying on the floor, and I had peed myself at some point. I remember feeling so ashamed of that later. I felt so tired and sore, but I looked up and saw my brother sitting on the couch watching his movie and completely ignoring me. He had unplugged the two phones we had and had them in his lap. I couldn't move for a long time, and I remember just laying there, hurting in my lungs, crying, but quietly because when I sucked in air, my chest felt broken. He didn't even look at me, but he said if I told Mom or Dad, he would beat me. I eventually crawled into the kitchen, walked up the stairs, slipped out of all my wet clothes, and fell into bed and to sleep. I never told my parents. He is now 38. Beat me many times before and after that incident, before he left the house at 18, but never that bad. He's a deadbeat dad, currently in prison for his 5th DUI, and substances possession charge, homeless when not in prison, has never held a job more than a few months, lies, cheats, steals, and my dad still loves him to death. I don't think I have ever loved my brother. Story 10. My sister used to abuse our grandparents' foster children. She also abused me and our cousins. She convinced our dad to sign for a car loan for her when she was in her early 20s because she had already trashed her credit. She never paid any of it, and he was already struggling financially. It sent into a downward spiral that ultimately ended in his death from an overdose years later, after being rendered homeless. She has always loved to date gang members, one of whom was implicated in the murder of her cousin. We share a father, but have different mothers. She was subsequently caught sleeping with multiple police officers to get information on the case, to keep her murdering boyfriend out of jail. In that same murder spree, 2 innocent people who had nothing to do with the gangs involved were executed after begging for their lives. They had just both happened to walk past at the wrong time. She still doesn't think her, now ex-boyfriend, should be in jail. Happily, he was convicted and won't be getting out of jail in this lifetime. She got married a few years later. A few months after the wedding, on Christmas Day, she tells her new husband, who, by all accounts, was actually a decent guy, that she is going out for milk or something, and she never comes back. When our father was in the hospital and I was having to have him taken off life support, she kept telling everyone she was on her way. Please wait for her. I did, for 2 days. Turned out she lied, never left her house, about 8 hours away, and thought it was hilarious she made us all wait. This is all on top of the mental and emotional abuse I suffered at her hands for years. She broke things I cared about, would keep me awake, and hit me with belts and BBQ tools if I fell asleep, for days at a time. She still posts on FB occasionally, from what I hear. After what happened with my dad, I sent her a message that I hope she died alone and blocked her on everything. She is a monster. Story 11. My brothers, half-brothers, they have the same father, but I have a different father, are a bit older than me. One day, they were both sitting on our dock fishing. The oldest brother picked up a knife out of the tackle box. They were about 12. It was a brand new knife of some kind, specifically for killing or cooking fish or something. He looks at my other brother and goes, I wonder how sharp this knife is. And without hesitation, he literally beat it into the top of the middle brother's thigh. Totally casual about it, like no big deal that the knife was in deep enough to stand upright by itself. Story 12. I've got nothing on some folks here, but she poisoned my cat, threw out all my food while I was selling my belongings on eBay to pay rent, because I was too fat, and would use my things without asking, sometimes using all of my consumables, and then saying to my wife, don't worry, he's got money. I really don't think she understood I was literally recycling bottles and cans to make rent, and she would steal the bill money I was saving for phone/internet/rent without a second thought and claim to our landlord. I never paid her. The poisoning ended up being the last straw, and we had to put him in an oxygen tent, and he needed his stomach pumped, etc. When it was all said and done, we were out of pocket all of our savings, that we had recently started the home purchasing process and needed the cash to close. Instead, we couldn't afford closing costs, and we ended up forfeiting all the money we had put into the process before that point and had to deal with the broker wanting to sue us. So now I make it a point to never announce my visits to family. She's 60+ minutes away from most of them, so she doesn't have time to show up. If I see her car parked at the relative's house I'm visiting, I will just drive away rather than risk engaging with her again. Story 13. Used my own child to hurt me. My parents would babysit my young son while I was working, and my older adult brother was there. He has always hated me and done everything in his power to hurt me because I was the baby of the family. My son was around 5-6 years old, and I caught him verbally impressing onto my child ideas of weird fetishes, like he was trying to corrupt him mentally to hurt me. Removed him from that situation as soon as I figured out what he was doing. I hate my brother. He has always done mean things to me my whole life. I swear he's a sociopath. Story 14. This wasn't a ducked up thing that my brother did to asterisk me asterisk personally, but I think it's worth mentioning. He and his now ex-girlfriend had a super toxic relationship. I don't know the whole story as I was never close with her, and I don't trust my brother's account of things. But there was something my brother did once that made me decide, oh, he's not just a banana in a toxic relationship. He's a manipulative abuser. He had his friend text him pretending to be the girlfriend's best friend. They orchestrated this whole story in which the best friend came on to my brother, but he turned her down because he's loyal to his girl. He even went as far as to save his friend's contact info as the best friend's phone number. When he showed his girlfriend the texts, it obviously looked like her best friend sent them. She ultimately believed my brother over her best friend because the phone number doesn't lie. Also, my brother's a fantastic liar, so that helped. Anyway, they've been broken up for years now, and the ex-girlfriend and best friend still hate each other. They had been friends since they were 7. I haven't spoken to him since he stole money from me to buy weed and denied it until I threatened to file a police report. Last I heard, he's in a happy relationship. I wish that girl luck. Story 15. Much older siblings here, specifically talking about my oldest brother. I was about 12 and parents were pretty deep in poverty, but he had serious wealth in the insurance industry. He offered to buy us a manufactured home, no strings attached. We accept, pick it out, move in, etc. Then he says, okay, your rent is this much. High rent for the area and something you would not move on to as a low-income family. Since we're already moved in and he holds the deed, we desperately SC the barrel making the rent. When we can't do it anymore eventually, he puts the house up for sale. I'm 18 at this point. So parents move out of state to something they can afford, and I'm left homeless. I'm good now though at 28. Bro has made a lot of good changes in his life, but I don't think I can ever forget this. Story 16. Tried to abuse, molest, and kill me several times. I had myself removed from the house when I was 14. My parents would do nothing about it. That's just what brothers do. Yet 2 years ago, he tried to apologize through text message. I refused to talk to him or be in the same state. This turned into him declare his romantic love for me and asking if I felt the same. I blocked his number. Story 17. He pushed me into the sliding glass door because I didn't know if the phone had rung or not. After about 5 minutes of him yelling about the phone, I snapped and said, "Just leave me alone." And his response was to shove me, crack the glass, and everything. For reference, I was 12 and he was 23. Story 18. Father's funeral, as he had died while I was on vacation in Mexico. And I wouldn't have gone anyway, to be honest. My brother, who has been in and out of prison for 30+ years, called to tell me that because I wasn't going home for the funeral, I was a scumbag. And if he had someone like me in prison, he would take the lid of a tuna can and slit me. I don't take his calls anymore. Story 19. He threw a fit and broke his phone when my parents didn't give him money for cigarettes and beer. He was 36 at that time. He constantly cheated his then fiancée out of money, enabled his 2 kids from a previous marriage to be awful kids, then had 2 more he couldn't raise with another woman. He's as abusive as our father. So I cut him out of my life as soon as I turned 18. Story 20. If I loved a toy, my older sister would purposely break it in some way. I had a Teddy Ruxpin, and I loved it so much so she broke his mouth off. I loved porcelain dolls. She broke all the hands or feet off. I loved Barbies. She cut the hair or nose off or break a leg off. If I liked a stuffed animal, she would tear the eye off or its tail. When we got older, she would take my makeup and just mush the lipstick on my desk or snap the eyeliner so it cracked and couldn't be sharpened, or just tap the frigid eyeshadow upside down on my desk so it broke. I loved drawing and painting, so she would just take a Sharpie and hold it on the friggin' paper until it bleed through every page. She didn't accidentally do this stuff either. She's 2 years older than me, and she would just casually walk in, break stuff, and then walk out of the room like nothing happened. When I got old enough to like boys, she would ask me who I liked and then tell me that boy liked her. Even if she didn't know the boy at all, she would just say he liked her. Later, that advanced to her giving head to basically any guy I liked or that she thought I liked. She once gave a hand job to a guy in my science class simply because we were paired up for a project, and she saw him being nice to me. I used to get my feelings hurt until I smartened up enough to tell her I liked my friend at the time's older brother, Derek. Derek was 19 and had a prescription for Valtrex. Story 21. It's a toss-up really between 3 things my brother has done. Found out my brother and his wife were not separated and getting a divorce. Something he'd been telling the whole family for over a year and she knew nothing about until I inadvertently said something to her. B. His posting on Facebook that my mother had passed away just to get sympathy likes. She was sick, but not yet dead, and I had to wake up and handle the massive freakout from relatives and friends. He then claimed he hadn't known it would be taken that way, even though people were sending him public condolences and talking about her in the past tense. C. Got confirmation from someone who knows him really well that he lied about having cancer at one point. Again, pretty sure that was for the sympathy and likes. There's a lot more and enough for a crap show times 10, but those are just the 3 biggest that impacted me and/or I just can't forgive him for. He also lied about having hurt his back, so he couldn't come to our mother's funeral. Only 2 weeks later, he posted photos of himself online holding his contractor's license, bragging about the jobs he was doing. He's never answered me on what miracle operation or treatment did he get to cure his bad back so fast and hasn't spoken to me since that day. Nothing of value has been lost. Story 22. My brother, who was 19 at the time, got a 17-year-old girl pregnant. I was only 10, but later found out that they had to go across state lines to Missouri to get married because Illinois wouldn't allow it. Otherwise, he'd have gone to jail for statutory abuse. Yeah, that marriage didn't last long. Story 23. Can't decide which was worse. Pretending to be pregnant, she was a teenager at the time, the night before my siblings' big school exam finals, my 21st birthday, presumably because the attention wasn't on her, as a school dropout with no job at the time, or the time she stole my aunt's money and house after she died, then tried to claim that there was no money. The council took the house back because we owed a load of tax. My mother, massive enabler who has never said no to her in her life, finally admitted to signing some legal documents, which allowed her to do all of this. My other siblings and I found bank statements afterwards. Scary thing is, I think she believes her own lies. Story 24. When I was maybe 6 or 7, my older sister, she was around 12 or 13 at the time, decided one day she wanted to see what the inside of a turtle's shell looked like. She had found a turtle in our backyard and took it up to our dad's shed where he had a little concrete slab in front of the doors to the shed. She started slamming the turtle down on the concrete until she cracked his shell open several times. It died, of course. I can remember this is my first traumatic memory I have of my childhood. She told me she would kill me if I told our parents. I just recently told them, and I'm now 31. I have no relationship with her at this point in my life. She needs a lot of help mentally, but refuses treatment. Story 25. She tried to wreck the car with me, and my other sister in it. I was 8 or 9. Toxic sister was 24. Took off yelling, "Let's duck and wreck tonight, girls," because her ex-boyfriend wouldn't take her back. We were in his neighborhood. We were screaming. He came running to the stop sign, made her turn around, and snatched me and not crazy sis out the car. Called our parents to come get us and wouldn't let her near us. Powder and being some kind of narcissistic borderline psycho don't mix well, kids. When I grew up, she wound up having sex with my ex. Now she lives with a boyfriend who isolates her and treats her like crap, and most of her teeth have fallen out from pills and other substances. I moved 2,000 miles away. Funny how that worked out. Story 26. I'm seeing some pretty ducked up stuff on here, and my stories don't really compare, but I have a few things. For one, my older brother gets pissed really easily and once flipped over a glass table in our living room. Whole thing shattered and I cut my foot. I don't remember what he was mad about since I was only around 4 or 5, but he must have been in his early teens at that point. Parents replaced it with custom-fitted glass, which was pretty expensive apparently. He also taped a knife to my parents' door once, which everyone assumed was a threat. He insisted he wasn't going to do anything, just wanted to scare them. He was at least 20 at the time. A lot of the other things I can think of are verbal, where he'll scream at people for tiny, insignificant things. He's rarely physically violent. It's just that he'll break your crap when you're not around and indirectly threaten you, ignore you for weeks at a time, etc. Everyone has to constantly walk on eggshells around him because of how explosive he is, and I can thank him for how sensitive and quiet I am. Story 27. My brother is 7 years older than me. He was my hero growing up and could do no wrong in my eyes. He treated me more like a little brother than a little sister. I have so many great memories of those times. After I graduated high school, he began to change, becoming increasingly mean to outright verbally and emotionally abusive. Eventually, he escalated to physical abuse towards his girlfriends, ex-wives, and myself. Outwardly, he's very charming and charismatic. In private, he is hateful, bitter, abuses alcohol and painkillers, and will take it out on you. He has hit me in the face, threw me against a wall, broke the front door to get to me in the house, broke into the house and came into my room pointing a loaded gun at me, beat me and kicked me in the stomach when I said Mom loved me. His dog got hit by a car. He was blackout drunk and refused to get up to help me get the dog to the vet. I lifted and carried his part St. Bernard into the car myself. Don't worry, Doggo only had a broken leg and he's fine now. That night, he came stumbling up the house still drunk and began screaming at our mom. He pushed her, threatened to hurt my cat, then began a fist fight with me in the kitchen. He knocked me to the ground and began choking me while I tried to bite him to get him off me. Mom was on the phone with 911 screaming, "He's killing her! He's killing her! Oh, hurry!" That was the nail in the coffin of our relationship. Why did he become like this? Who knows? Maybe it was the multiple TBIs, the alcohol abuse, the painkiller abuse, or maybe a little of all the above. He can definitely control it. He made sure to only hurt me when I was home alone, except for the choking incident, and does the same with his exes. Story 28. My brother came into my care when my mom died when he was 10. He was a nightmare, running away, throwing fits, being violent. He didn't know how to wipe his ass or shower, and he lied all the time trying to get me in trouble. I had to drive from Ohio to Kansas to finalize paperwork with the court. I took him and my friend for a 3-day fun trip trying to connect with him. He had a rough year. At the end of the trip, we were packing up when he told me he locked my keys in the car. He then told the hotel people I kidnapped him and he was trying to escape. They called the cops. He left, and the cops came and arrested me and my friend. My paperwork was in the car that he locked the keys in, so I couldn't prove I had custody. He was found 3 hours later and bold-faced screamed and claimed I was a stranger. The cops had someone unlock the car, and I was able to show them custody paperwork. I spent 3 days trying to connect, bought him stuff, took him anywhere he wanted, had heart-to-heart over things. The entire time he was planning this. He later told me he was hoping they would kill me. He hated me because I was poor and a female. He wanted to be in foster care. He did this a few times, even trying to get CPs to take away my daughter. The entire time all I wanted was to make sure he grew up and didn't have to be in foster care. He was later diagnosed bipolar and with oppositional defiance order. My mother spent her time pampering him while they lived together. I was a single mother in college at the time. When my mom called me, she said EAPS was trying to take him away for him beating her and doing substances. I quit school, sold my stuff, and moved down. 6 months later, she was dead from lung disease. I didn't really have a relationship with my brother, half-brother, who was 13 years younger, and he was already suffering from addiction and mental issues. I spent the next 8 years trying to get him the help he needed. It was a constant struggle. He would lie and try his best to make every day hell for me. When he was 18, he wanted to stay in my house and play video games in his underwear while not cleaning up after himself. Unemployed, no goals. When I asked him to clean his area, he flipped one day and got violent with me to the point he was going to punch me. He threatened to kill me and my daughter in our sleep. I had had enough, and I called the cops and kicked him out. We haven't talked since, really. He moved out of state, and I think he's living with his dad who disowned him and was in jail for attempted murder. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. I wanted him to heal and become a better person. I failed. I think about it often, and if I should have just allowed him to go into foster care. I wish him the best still. My brother was admitted and diagnosed by professionals a few times. He was medicated and had therapy. Unfortunately, he would at times refuse medications and going to therapy, especially when he had an episode. He was also as big as me, and no amount of asking, grounding, pleading would get him to go at times. He would refuse to bath, piss, and crap all over his room. He did it often on his clothing in the closet for some reason, and punch holes in walls when he would have a fit. These are common in some bipolar cases, as such was told to me by his psychiatrist. He also was diabetic, so we also had to watch his sugar intake. Just wanted to clear that up. I did take him to proper people for help, both medical and mental. Story 29. I have 2 special needs siblings. They're sweethearts, but there's still a lot to handle. When we first got my little sister back from the orphanage, she was struggling to adjust to our house and really didn't like being told what to do. One day, when my mom told her she couldn't have a snack, she straight up pissed on the floor. Story 30. My sister stole my child's ADHD medication, causing him severe ramifications in school, both academically and socially. She was emptying the capsules, so I had no idea I was giving my child empty pills. For a year. I'm a single parent, as in, my children have no dad. Dad doesn't ever ask how they are or to see them. And I struggled with his behavior and punishments, and nothing was working. And I kept going back to his doctor and saying, see, it's not working. Med increases. Random days, it would work. Then nothing again. Because she couldn't steal all the contents of the pills in one swipe, so I'd randomly give him a dose of a pill she missed. I was so confused and defeated, and so was my poor kid. Story 31. My brother's a bit of a problem, not just for the family, but also society. He is a deadbeat father because of his addiction, and now he is looking at serving up to 15 years in prison because he is a 2-time convicted felon that was caught with 2 firearms and over 100 rounds of ammunition, plus false ID to Leo and various substances in his possession. So the worst thing he has ever done is be a deadbeat father. Story 32. Oldest brother went to prison for a string of non-violent crimes, mostly robberies. This was a long time ago, and he's much better now. He's a loving father of 2, husband, okay-ish brother, very demanding. But coming up, he was a bit of a nightmare. It was me and 2 older brothers. The oldest brother watched over us a lot because our parents had to work. Oldest brother forced my other brother to be his slave, basically, cooking and cleaning for him nonstop. If he refused, my brother beat the crap out of him. Since I was the youngest, my oldest brother found me annoying. My bedroom door, for some reason, locked from the outside. So every day when I got home from my earliest memory until around 10, I was locked in my room. He would then tell me if I said anything to my parents, he'd beat my ass and just lock me in my room again. I told my parents every day. And every day he beat my ass and locked me back in my room. My parents never did anything or even fixed the lock. We were extremely poor, so I just assumed they had bigger things to deal with, like how we're going to eat or afford rent. Spending your developing years alone in a bedroom with nothing to do and a bad case of ADHD should have been extremely damaging. But thankfully, I'm pretty normal. Not a horrible story by any means, or as compared to most others here, but still felt like sharing. Story 33. She's mellowed out with age and we've mended fences. But man, my sister was a ducking nightmare until she finally moved out of our parents' house. Worst thing she ever did was when I was 15 and she was 19. She found my adult films on the family PC and immediately showed it to our parents, thinking that they'd be pissed off and punish me for being gay. Story 34? I was the nightmare. My sister threw a tennis cess cord into my train set, and I countered with a fork I was holding. She has 4 little dots at her hairline to this day. Thankfully, we matured and are now best friends. Not really sure how that happened, come to think of it. We never used to protect each other except when my mother pitched a fit, at me of course, and started screaming and throwing things. Now I'd take a bullet for her twice over. Story 35. Okay, so not nearly as bad as some of the things on here. I'll list off some things that I remember. 1. Threatened to slit herself when I was 8 and 9-ish, resulting in me going around and hiding all the scissors too. Threatening to jump off the deck we had at our old house was at least 20 feet high. 3. Threatened to punch my mom. 4. Screams at my mother about how she never gets anything she wants. She nearly gets everything she wants. 5. Oh, I forgot to mention all the times she threatened to call CPS to tell them our mother was hitting her. She never has laid a hand on us. Or self-harm and go to the neighbors and tell them our mother did it. 6. Threw paint at a wall. 7. Threatened to drop a glass vase on the ground in front of the family therapist. 8. Threatened to slap my mother. 9. Slams her head against the wall. 10. Throws other things besides paint. 12. Threatened to throw something at me, then said I usually say things that would warrant it. 12. Haven't forgotten about the time she was talking about the girl who was mean to her. Then said she, mean girl, must have been anorexic. Then she, my sister, said she wished she would die painfully. 13. Said something similar about a girl who was abused by her parents and how she should just die. 14. Threatened to physically hurt me. 15. Once attempted to smash my door open to get in a few nights ago. She asked me why I didn't like her. And I realized, duck, that's a long list. Story 36. My stepbrother falsely ID'd as me when he was busted driving recklessly on a motorcycle. He was on probation for substances charges at the time and didn't want to go to the slam. I missed a whole day off work going to court when I was informed by phone that there was a bench warrant for failure to appear. Once I got to court and the ticketing officer saw me, he took me to a conference room where he described little bro. I made sure he had the correct home address for the punk. After he was released from jail, I made sure he understood he did it again. He would walk crooked for the rest of his life. Story 37. Never shared this with anyone, but hey, I guess it's now or never. I have a stepbrother who, I'm not sure why, but decided to slap my ass. I was approaching my teenage years and we both played basketball, so I thought it was just kind of normal. You see that stuff on TV where folks would smack each other's asses as a sign of good job. So I kind of shrugged it off. But then things started getting weird. He would only slap my butt when we were alone. And then it went from slapping to squeezing and sort of this massage-type movement with his hands, kind of like he was feeling it for some reason. I remember one time he came from behind me, rubbed my butt before slapping it, and I dropped a bowl. My parents were in the other room and asked if we were all right, and he told me to tell them everything was. He and I don't have much of a relationship anymore, and we no longer really talk. And honestly, I've kind of repressed it, which I know is not good for me. Story 38. After checking the comments, I've come to realize my sister isn't a total nightmare, but she still ducked me up like a lot. Since I was young, she'd always point out if I was just slightly fat, etc. I was underweight already, but with her comments telling me she was skinnier than me and that her stomach looked better, I really got bad body issues. For actual years, I wasn't even realizing how skinny I was. I'm just glad I didn't fall into an ed. Story 39. There did attempt to groom one of my sisters and I. He tried it with me when I was an abnormally naive 18-year-old. He had been trying it on my sister since she was 8 years old. So that takes the cake for an act by a singular sibling. Otherwise, I consider the most ducked-up group activity was the way everyone ganged up on myself and the other black sheep sibling. We were essentially second-class citizens, so far as the family was concerned, and it showed in the way we were treated. We were made fun of, picked on, bullied, provoked, etc., and if we fought back in any way, it was blamed on us by our siblings. Our parents bought it hook, line, and sinker pretty much every damn time. So my oldest brother got to have his little kingdom in which the black sheep siblings were powerless, and it was condoned by my parents. Story 40. Reading all of these makes me feel like my older brother wasn't actually as bad as I thought he was, but I still think he was awful nonetheless. He's just a bit under 11 years older than me, and growing up, he was constantly fighting with my mom, pushing her into screaming, emotionally manipulating her, and as he got older, he would get in her face and say such awful, hateful things that she would be shaking and crying for the rest of the day. He started targeting me too when I was in around 4th grade because I started to defend my mom. He would render me the same way though, shaking, crying, and messed up for the day. He was also a thief, as he scammed me out of my belongings, or straight up stole them to sell them. He also stole all of the money in me and my younger brother's piggy banks when we were very little because he wanted to buy crap. He would also steal my parents' stuff and hide it in the attic, only to give it back to them years later and claim he found it. When I was 16, freshly dropped out of school due to severe mental health struggles, He once cornered me and got really in my face, telling me that I have absolutely no reason to have depression because his parents got divorced when he was little. He has a different dad. So he obviously had it harder. He had told me off like this because my mom told him to put his razor blades away as I was thinking about self-harm, which he made fun of her for asking this. He said a lot of awful crap to me that I'd prefer not to state. We didn't speak again until his father died almost a year later. When he started bullying my dad, his stepdad too, my dad kicked him out of the house. This was before his father died, BTW. Although we address it as him moving out to this day because we forgave him. I still care about him because he is my brother, and I know he's got a lot of problems, but I also easily start hating him again anytime he's awful to my mom these days, which depends on his mood. He can be really sweet to her when he wants to be, and I will never be able to relax and trust him again as my heart rate goes up almost any time I see him. He doesn't know this, though, so he thinks I don't have any issues with him, but he honestly did leave me with some trauma, at least according to my therapist, after basically watching him verbally abuse my mom for my entire life. Passive aggression and people yelling legit makes me panic, and it's partly his fault. When he moved out, my friends and therapist all noted that my mental health noticeably improved. And even though the family has forgiven him, he's never allowed to live with us again. I still live with my parents and younger brother, and moving out at 18 is not expected of us. While we get along fine now, I don't think I could ever fully get past all that he did when I was growing up. Story 41. Damn, this post was made for me. Me and my twin brother were adopted from Ukraine, born 1 year after Chernobyl. Not sure if I can make excuses for him due to the horrific orphanage we were in for years, or more so excuses I make for him due to radiation poisoning. Where to begin? He is an absolute monster since birth, and now residing in solitary confinement in upstate New York prison. As children being adopted by American parents, first year here, he constantly punched holes in all walls throughout the house. This escalated to physically punching me. Broken nose, eye socket, arm and ribs on me. Fast forward to middle school, he was a full-blown vodka alcoholic by grade 10, further fueling his rage. Child Protective Services came in and took him away for a little. Best years of my life safety-wise. However, in high school, he underwent intensive therapy and was allowed back into our lives to a certain capacity. But I am his twin and I forgive him. He is a part of me. Only him and I understand what we went through. Fast forward early 20s, he became an addict and would steal all of my things to pawn for substances. Even had me come out to hang out with his friends. Very bad, dangerous situation for me. He started to get arrested for DUCKED and violence, fighting others, destruction of property, etc. I went to college, got my master's degree and my own place, and grateful for the life I have made myself. I have bailed my brother out of jail countless times. Seriously, I have spent thousands of dollars to help him. I've looked for him and found him in motels and spent 15 hours in airs, multiple times, to get him help and drive him to rehab, which I always foot the bill. I have picked him up from jail so many times I started to know the police officers on a name basis. I always take my brother in and let him sleep on my couch or air mattress in my own home. He has gone as far as to call the police on me in my own home, and I have actually gotten arrested because of him because I refused to press charges against him. But he had this little defense scratch on his arm, and this fool spitefully got me arrested to bring me down to his crap level. Now I have a record, but it was thrown out by the judge in court. Yes, he brought me to court while wanting to live on my couch straight out of jail. What crushed me was just this past year. I took him in from a lengthy jail stay. Yet again, I tried to set him up in vocational school to build a future. I clothed and fed him. I did everything to give him stability, since we did not have that growing up in Ukraine as orphaned. One day I went to work and came home, and my place is barren. Everything pawned. What hurt me to the core was my only prized possession, a locket necklace from our actual birth mother I have had all my life. He pawned that for substances. I cannot tell you the pain of a heart shattered. I sobbed in the floor as he kicked me in the face to shut up. That's when neighbors called the police and the state persecuted him and put him away based on his lifelong offense record. Pathetic me, I cried when they arrested him and took him away, BC. He gaslighted me all my life that his pain was due to me and it's all my fault. I believed it because I have normalized the abuse. I tried to give him the life we couldn't be given. My own flesh and blood twin. I cannot anymore. It hurts too much. I have omitted many details of horrific crap he has caused over the years. Most I block out because deep down I still love him since he is my twin, but I barely know him anymore. I have lost my other half of myself. I still don't know why I always keep forgiving him, but I think after he pawned our birth mother's locket for Met, that basically killed me and he's dead to me by now. Sick part is that I still convince myself it's radiation poisoning that made him so violent and hurtful since we are twins, and I am nothing like him. Story 42. It's not that it was her fault at the time, but my sister used to purposefully step on my feet, bump into me, steal money, and was just a goddamned bully in childhood. The worst thing she did was abandoning animals. She had a kitten, maybe a month old, that she put outside and just abandoned. I never saw it again, so it probably got hit by a car. All of this was caused by my mother, who spoiled my sister and hated me for the crime of being born. Parental favoritism, even mild cases, breeds resentment and shame for being unloved. This was another level. Mom encouraged fistfights, racism, homophobia, and took pride in hitting her kids. My sister is now bipolar. I'm avoidant, anxiety-ridden, and depressed, and it's all due to parental abuse. Story 43. I was bedridden, really sick, in and out of the hospital. My sister and I shared a room at that point. My sister started calling my name when I fell asleep, only to pretend she was asleep when I inevitably woke up to respond. It escalated to her keeping me up most nights, throwing things from across the room to scare me awake and calling for me anytime even though I was asleep. Keep in mind, I'm on really strong pain meds and trying to figure out if I'm going to die or not. Nightmare egg donor ignored my complaining, telling me I just have to deal with the fact that my sister talks in her sleep. Showing bruises from things she threw at me didn't convince my mother. It escalated again one night. I was pretty doped up and swimming in and out of a drug sleep. My sister started up again with her antics, but I was genuinely too far gone to respond. It pissed her off, apparently, because she got up to turn on the light and hover over me, threatening to harm me, and going on about how spoiled I am for pretending to be so ill just for attention. I texted my boyfriend at the time, who was sleeping downstairs on the couch, and he said he had heard and would help me talk to my mother in the morning. I don't remember if I fell asleep in bed or if I went downstairs to sleep by him, but he was mad enough on my behalf that my mother switched rooms around that day to give me my own room. He was a banana in so many other ways, but I still appreciate him standing up for me. I'm no contact with the entire family now. I'm sure mine isn't the worst story, but whatever the medical problems I had that had me so sick was my small-town docs refused to diagnose. I did almost die. It was terrifying. On top of that, I've got a lot of digestive problems that may or may not be untreated Crohn's, but again, small-town doctors, all of that was untreated at the time of this story. Story 44. My sister and I are 15 years apart. I was an accident, and her teenage self was super pissed I was born. She basically spent every waking moment of her teens being pissed. I was alive, siphoning resources and attention away from her. She never paid me a moment's attention, and I remember her kicking me at the age of 19. Anyway, she moved out of my parents' house to get married at 24. And I was not allowed inside her new house for the next 2 years. When I finally got to visit the house, she turned her back and walked away from me when I crossed the threshold. I'll never forget it. Story 45. My older sister has been a nightmare pretty much her whole life. She constantly lies and then lies more to try and get out of that lie. She doesn't remember what she told one person to the next, so there's multiple versions of the lie. One time, out of nowhere, she just upped and said she won a nice jackpot in the lottery. And she was just going around telling the family this, and how she was going to do this and that with the money. When the money wasn't coming in, she didn't understand why. They gave her a card, and the money was supposed to go on it. So my dad took a half day off work and went with her to the state lottery place. They had no idea who she was or any record of her being there before. Even looked on video and never saw her. Hell, she had just had her youngest son, total of 4 and 3 baby daddies. Kids range from 27, 9, but anyway, the youngest was still little in a car seat, and they didn't even have anyone on video coming or going in the building with a car seat at all for the day before, of and after she claimed she was there. But still, not to give up on her lie and admit she lied, she took it to the next level. She would get off work at let's say 6, for example, say she had a couple of errands to run after work and wouldn't get home, that's right, still at home with mom and dad, to her baby, who she left with our older parents to take care of until 10 or so, and you would never get a straight real answer from her. I could keep going on, but I think this is long enough. I just feel bad for my parents, but they keep coddling her and letting her do it. They have kind of gotten a little more onto her about the past year or two, though, but not as much as they should. Story 46. I don't know why this even happened, but when I was 8, I was hit by a car because of my sibling. She said we were allowed out when she never even asked anyone if we could, and she was pushing me down the driveway as I got hit. Instead of being sorry for what happened, she was jealous that I was getting attention after nearly dying, and repeatedly told me to jump on front of another car and kill myself every day, and she conned my brother into treating me the same way. So for years, I suffered from her bullcrap instead of trying to heal and learning to deal with this chronic pain I now suffer from every day. She also done tons of other ducked-up crap to me over the years, but this incident changed me forever, and I can't forgive someone so ducking evil that they can behave like that. I hope she suffers for what she did to me. Story 47. My sister has really severe OCD. She isn't a nightmare herself, but living with her was really tough SP since she didn't want to admit she had OCD. I wasn't allowed in the kitchen ever growing up. There were times she wouldn't let me even breathe in her direction BC. She didn't want my air getting on her. I still have never been in her bedroom, even though it's a few feet away from mine. Story 48. One of them, almost by accident, caused my death as a baby. And when I was a toddler, she slammed the backyard door so hard because I wasn't allowed outside by her. Thing is, my thumb was between the door and frame. It's a good thing the tendon wasn't severed. Otherwise, I'd be thumbless on my dominant hand. Also made my life a living hell for the most part. Insulted my fiancée on numerous occasions. Might be peanuts compared to other stories, but she's nothing but trouble. Story 49. Forced my father to work his regular job and then to spend months fixing up the upper floor on his house so she could move in with 3 kids after a messy divorce. She didn't get a job for a long time, and finally did, but only part-time because she made more money picking up shifts. Never got any certifications even though the job paid for it. She was only supposed to be there, wreaking havoc until she got on her feet. Then until the eldest was college, then the second, then the third. They finally had to have the sheriff evict her because she was having her drug dealer drop her joints at the house. Illegal here, and hella illegal then. It would take hours to go into all the stuff she did to my parents, but the worst is what she did to her kids. She made all of them get jobs. Eldest was able to at 15 by 16 because she needed money to pay my parents' rent and utilities. The eldest worked 20 hours a week while in high school minimum, for example, although it was usually more. Thing is, my dad never charged her rent and paid for all the utilities. She made the kids work while in school to get money from them that they thought was going to the household. It didn't. We are still not sure exactly where it all went. Story 50. My brother is a flat-earthing anti-vax and anti-mask loser. He brags about being ultra-chill, but he is the least chill person I've ever met. And when my dad died, he stole my inheritance and committed fraud using my uncle's name. Broke his heart, and the man died knowing his nephew couldn't have possibly cared less about what he did. Story 51. We tried to go into a residents-only gym community center type thing for a townhouse community. We were immediately kicked out. Later on in the evening, he drags me out of bed. We walked to community center where I thought he would knock a plant over or something. He proceeded to crap on the landing by the front door, then bare hands smear it all over the windows and railings. Following day, we were walking by. Same guy who kicked us out is cleaning it and says, "We had a visit from the poop monster last night." Story 52. 1. I came home from college one day to find out he gave away my ski equipment to his friends without my permission. Note here that my dad bought it for me. I can't afford that stuff. His excuse? Well, you weren't using it. 2. He used my dad for money and his car when my dad was dying of inoperable disease and was unable to say no because he was full of morphine to deal with his pain. Note that my brother did not have a driver's license at this time, but this did not stop him from taking my dad's car. 3. In high school, he hijacked a friend of mine one summer whose parents always took him and his sister to expensive restaurants at midday. My friend's parents, being too polite, would not send him home at those times, even though I said they should. 4. He wanted me to give him my old driver's license when I turned 22 and got a new one so he could go drinking. For those who are unaware, depending upon the situation, could have been the one going to jail if he was caught with my license, so I said no. His excuse? Well, my friend's brother did it. Why can't you be cool like him? 5. He repeatedly took my mother's car, without her permission, to see his girlfriend even though he didn't have a license. One night, he wrecked it when he hit a deer. My mother, being kind, did not press charges of any kind. Story 53. My stepbrother is a real piece of crap. Stole my car, stole my money, and said someone else must have done it. We lived together with nobody else. Stole my WD constantly, stole my old games, and gave them to other family members as gifts when he visited them. I once saw him piss on his sister's head in a pool. They are my step-siblings. Would go pick up WD for me and snatch like half of it out of the bag before it got to me. Because I was young and didn't know any better that I was being ripped off. Slashed all of my tires after being kicked out of the house. Slashed my dad's tires. Stole his dead grandmother's jewelry and pawned it for substances money. Stole my dad's laptop with the final photos and videos of my grandmother. Laptop never showed up again. Abusive to animals and women. Would slap his girlfriend on front of me because he thought it was fine. Violently racist. We watched 28 Days Later, and he went on a tirade when the black female kissed the white guy. Intentionally knocked up his girlfriend because mom won't refuse to give me money if she has a grandkid. Maintains highly racist attitude while listening to primarily black music and talking black. After my dad volunteered for band boosters, parents selling concessions at football games to fundraise for the band, my dad had the lockbox locked in his Suburban to drive to the school the next day. Stepbrother threw a brick through the back window, stole the lockbox, and then pretended it wasn't him. He had a friend get locked up in juvenile hall for a weekend, so he broke into that friend's shed and robbed him blind. When the friend got out, he called my stepbrother, who was giving me a ride somewhere at the time, and I had to listen to him talk about, "We will catch Westcourtver did this to you," knowing full well he was the one who robbed them. He would break into houses that were for sale and smash things and set paintings on fire. After his stripper girlfriend birthed 2 of his children, named one after a character from The Fast and the Furious, and one after a character from WD, He put her to work doing webcam shows to make money because he's sure as duck won't get a job. Also, he went to prison at age 16 for 17 felonies, mostly involving breaking and entering into homes and vehicles and stealing. I could keep going. There's a reason he is written into my father's will for $1. He's been excommunicated for over a decade now. After 5 years of not talking to him, I got a message on Xbox asking if I wanted a computer he was selling. 0% chance he bought that computer. That is all I could remember in a single 10-minute session, but yeah, real piece of crap. Story 54. This isn't as bad as most in here, but this really pissed me off. My piece of crap brother, who has been a real estate agent for over 20 years, took out an interest-only loan on his home 17 years ago. The loan company required him to start paying the principal. He can't afford it, so what does he do? He knows that my recently widowed mother had a few bucks from life insurance. She loaned him $20K to help so he wouldn't lose his home. Less than 6 months later, he comes to her for another $20K, leaving her with nothing because he would lose his Mercedes without her help. He couldn't get a second job because, oh, what would people think? I learned about this from a journal I found of my mother's when I helped her move. I learned after that when he would come to her house to help her, he charged her for it. For things like mowing the lawn and raking leaves. When he sold things of my father's for her, he took a commission of 25%. He would ask for gas money because she lived 2 hours away from him. He refuses to pay her back. He has plenty of money to buy his grandkids things like go-karts and to take them to Disney World. She refinanced her home just so she could make ends meet. As in, she needed to balance her checkbook to see if she had enough money at the end of the month to be able to buy an ice cream cone after church. She tried for a couple of years to get his help in selling her home. It was in rough shape, and Mom couldn't deal with it on her own. He had taken all her money so she couldn't fix it. He was too embarrassed about her home to represent her as an agent. I was able to help her get it fixed and sold, even though I live half the country away from her. He will no longer have anything to do with her because she didn't use him or the real estate company he works for to sell her house or to buy her new place. I knew none of this at the time, as my mother is a private person and was mortified that I found out. It broke my heart that I didn't know because I could have helped. She is doing well in her own now, but I try my best to spoil her now because she deserves it. No adult child should sponge off their parent. He's despicable. Story 55. My sister told her son that she would buy him a PS4 if he could find a used one around $200. Kid worked hard to find a system at $200, which was a bit of work because of the PS5 shortage increasing the PS4 price. Finally, someone to agree to $200 flat, and sister said she'd get it done for him. About a week later, sister told her son that the seller scammed her, and not only would he not be getting the PS4, but since it was his fault they got scammed, he now owed her the money for not seeing it coming or some crap. My sister never pays for the kids' phone plans. She has them on a different plan so she can miss the payment and her own phone won't be shut off. So when my nephew told me about it, I had him give me a call on her phone and check the messages. Seller contacted every day for 4 days, asking crap like, "Dude, I want you to have this thing, but you need to respond." I just think of my sister sitting around reading that crap and still coming up with this bull crap to try and steal money from a preteen. Story 56. My brother met his wife in college and they both went super hardcore Catholic, like Latin Rite Catholic. Over the next 10-ish years, he went through my bags while I was visiting to find my birth control and confront me about it, became an alcoholic, fathered 4 children in 6 years, taught his daughter that my whole family was going to hell. I learned because she told us so. Refused to get a diagnosis, services for his clearly autistic, stole money from my parents, cheated on his wife twice, abandoned his wife and children with no warning for another woman, stole money from his ex-wife that had been sent by her family to pay for groceries, since she was actually a good wife and didn't work, and abused me when I was a child. Story 57. Not so awful in the long run, but my brother tried to make the most money out of my mom's death, sold the house without telling the other brothers, basically hijacked the estate for as long as he could. But because he wasn't smart, we made out pretty good. It didn't hurt that he was greedy and screwed everyone he could to make the most money. Just hurtful, and that didn't reflect what we were taught by our parents. Story 58. Man, I had an abusive older brother growing up. All of my friends and even some of his friends knew how violent and short-tempered he was with me and my older sister, older than him. We are all under 20 months apart from each other, so we went through puberty, getting braces, attending the same primary schools all at the same time. I could honestly spend hours writing about the times my brother went overboard with the abuse. My father was sterile to the whole damn thing. My father doesn't know how to be a father. Everything from first-generation immigrant parental trauma to being bullied your entire childhood because of 9/11s had done to wider societies, perception of your race affected my psyche, but none more than my brother. Story 59. Sybing is 4 years older than me. Constantly lied about things that occurred when we were kids to make me out to be the bad guy and at fault. Twisted situations and words to make me seem like the antagonist. Got the first person they kissed, whilst we were on holiday to punch me in the face. I was like sub 10 years old, constantly made fun of me for everything they could. Decided they were allowed to tell me how I should live my life and change things. Once told me that just because my 3 immediate family members were bananas to me and knew how to push my buttons, that I had an anger problem, and that I'd abuse any partner I have ever had. Story 60. I had 6 siblings, 1 passed because of drug abuse, and I only have contact with my full brother, because honestly, he's the best of all of us. I'm the youngest. Here's a list. My sister, the oldest, is 500 pounds, would constantly put me down for my weight. Yes, I'm overweight, but not nearly as bad as her, and I'm working on it. And made fun of my weight while my mom was in the hospital for almost dying. I don't know how, but my niece has turned out to be the sweetest, smartest little girl I've ever known. She is now with a druggie who is trying to get his kids back. 2. My oldest brother is part of the KKK. Haven't spoken to him in 10 years. My 3rd oldest is now passed. We had a great relationship before he got on substances. I always had more sympathy for him because his dad was killed when he was 11. The worst thing he did was in a fueled rage. He got mad at my mom, stormed out the door. When I went to go after him, he kicked the door and broke 2 of my toes. I miss him though, the old him. And my brother after him got all 5 of his kids taken away because while his GF was breastfeeding their recent baby, they were both doing met. They're pregnant again apparently. He stole a ton of my crap right after my mom died. I lived with my mom until she passed. He's just a piece of crap. I pretty much tell people I have 1 brother. Story 61. Pretty tame compared to most of these stories, but my sister has a history of being incredibly nosy. My fiancé didn't know this as we don't spend a lot of time with my sister. He had my engagement ring shipped to her house so I wouldn't see it or the shipping label. It was in a plain box, but she took the address off of the label, Googled the company and saw they mostly make rings and 1 or 2 watches, and then called my mother to tell her. When we weren't engaged within a week, she then called my dad and his wife to tell them what was happening. When I called to share the happy news, it wasn't a surprise to anyone, and we'll never get that moment back. Her excuse was, it could have been a watch. I didn't ruin anything. She also ruined a lot of my belongings when I was young and trapped 4 of my fingers in door. Story 62. My older sister is a complete duck-up, got hooked on meth when she was 18, and spent the next several years making my life miserable as she became more and more violent. Finally, it came to a head as I was driving her home with my girlfriend, now married to her. She wanted me to pull over to McDonald's to get her food, but she'd just had oral surgery. And I didn't want to waste any money on her, so we got into a heated argument about it. She stepped out of my car at a stoplight and I drove 2 miles away, planning on moving out when I got home so I didn't have to deal with her or my grandmother's bullcrap anymore. I went back to pick her up after a phone call from my grandmother who threatened me if I didn't. I got her in the car and told her to stay quiet, but she wouldn't and eventually ended up punching me in the face as I was driving and kept screaming, driving my girlfriend into a frenzied panic and tears. I packed up all my stuff when I got home, and her and my grandmother spent the whole time yelling obscenities at my girlfriend and I. As I was leaving, they only cared about money and kept asking what they would do without me to claim for Social Security. She tried reaching out several times over the next months, acting all sweet and saying she had changed, and I ignored every advance. When she realized I wouldn't respond, she turned to berating me and trying to come to my work and harassing me. In addition to that event, she tried to beat me twice, punched our grandmother twice in front of me. Our grandmother denied it all when I called the cops so she wouldn't go to jail. She abused our dog when she got pissed, destroyed the only gift I ever got her, tried to get me fired from my job. Her dealer boyfriend showed up to the house with a gun and threatened to kill everyone and so much more. If she ever approaches me again, I will not hesitate to personally send her straight to hell where she belongs. Story 63. When I was 6 or 7, I was going through a very hard time. We had an abusive household, and my mom had just admitted to me she wasn't coming back. I was gifted for Christmas a baby doll. I carried her around for about a month, then one night my brothers woke me up. They had shaved baby doll head, cut out her eyes, lit her head on fire. If anyone cares, none of my 6 brothers ever graduated high school, and most of them are felons, all but 2 in fact. Story 64. Brother abused myself and my brother. Stole from my parents money, guns, jewelry, coins. Cheated on and was divorced by wife number 1. Gave up all parental rights to his kids to get out of child support. Abused his daughters, got kicked out by his wife, second one. Moved in with my other brother, broke up that marriage. Marries his Sil, beats his stepkids. Leaves her bankrupt and destitute. Leaves her for her best friend marries her. Tells everyone to get over his behavior. It was in the past. When he died, lies about being in Vietnam, working Alaska pipeline, and tried to make everyone feel like he was such a hero. Scumbag. Story 65. My sister is an addict. She did a lot of extremely ducked up crap. But here's one. She is obsessed with this one guy. She stalks him, calls him, talks about marrying him, and for some reason, he still chats with her. But sometimes he blocks her, but then he talks to her again. He's really toxic too. He degrades her a lot and she sees no problem. What's worse is that this all still happens, but I've given up on caring about what she does at this point. There's also the time where she physically went to my school and vandalized it when nobody was there. My school later realized she was my sister, and I got confronted by the counselor with all the teachers knowing what happened. It really wrecked me. My family also had to pay off all that was vandalized. She also let out all my pet birds. We had 14, but now it's 7. She got arrested the other day, and honestly, I don't know what to expect anymore. There are worse situations mentioned here, so I won't really go full story mode about what she has done. Story 66. My older siblings tortured me for most of my childhood any opportunity they had. At the age of 5, my older sister was responsible once to watch me because I was home with chickenpox. She offered to do my hair and make me feel better. She proceeded to tease every inch of my hair into a rat's nest and then hair-sprayed it all together. She stuffed black pepper into my nose while I was sleeping. My brother threatened to beat me and then locked me outside of the house when all the rest of our family was sleeping. He pulled me out of bed to do this. He abused me. He tied me to a chair in our basement with Christmas ribbon and forced me to drink beer and enjoyed watching me vomit all over myself. Continued emotional and physical abuse. My sister held a party, and when I went downstairs to get my younger sister and I something to eat because we had been upstairs and ordered to not come out for hours, my sister flew at me in front of the party and proceeded to kick me repeatedly while I was on the floor and then hiding under the table. I was mocked in my family for being a tattletale, called a psycho and an abuser in my adult life, to diminish my credibility in case I ever tattled again. They have been the absolute terror of my life, including my neglectful mother who allowed the abuse. Thankfully, my younger sister was spared. It's taken many years to find peace from the torture they inflicted on my upbringing. Story 67. Okay, for starters, she married a known methead that has like 6 kids he can't see, then had kids with him. She then got her kids taken away in places without mom after a bust at their home where they were cooking some substances. I should mention she refused to take an addict test for CPS, leading us to believe she was also using and doing meth, and turned out to be pregnant as well at this time. Well, he gets out of prison and he has one of the previously mentioned 6 kids show up looking for a place to live. The kid is 16 and he moves in with them. Everything seems fine for a while then. Husband goes back to prison for domestic assault, but TBH, none of us are sure who actually assaulted who. BC, they are both physical people. The stepson stayed around helping out with the kids. Stepson is now 18. Sister announces after the funeral of one of her ex that she with stepson, and they're now in a relationship. Crap, what a hell, ducked up. Husband gets out if prison they reconcile. His son moves on and gets engaged. He then finds out she had a thing with his son. He gets back on Met in this time. They end up divorcing and she starts dating the son full-time and her ex starts dating the son's ex-fiancé. The whole ordeal has been one big crap shown she broke it off with the stepson, but still, what a hell, dude. Story 68. Oh, okay, I might win this one. My brother tells anyone who listens that I willingly ducked our father. Our father's in prison now, and I was 12 when the abuse started. This is all stated in police files, and he's had consent explained to him, and our mother agrees with him. He has also spent the last 6 or so years slandering me online and trying to join any space I occupy so he can tell his sob stories to my friends. Thankfully, I have good friends who shut him down wherever possible. I'm 24 now and getting ready to press charges. I don't want to, and it's an absolute last resort, but it's really been hurting my mental health and the defamation needs to stop. All of this came about because I have always refused to let my shoddy childhood define me. I haven't had immediate family in nearly 7 years now, and I'm okay with that. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the waters of the womb. Story 69. Grabbed my arm and moved it behind me like cops do, and kept applying pressure trying to slowly break it while I screamed at agony. I couldn't move my arm without it hurting for a long time. I was 6 or so and he was older. My parents blamed me for it, saying I provoked his anger and deserved it. No surprise, similar physical assaults happened throughout my life until we became adults, and I moved away. He's a cop now. He's also been accused of hitting his GFS. Despite being a walking stereotype of toxic masculinity, I forgave him and tried to be his friend. Until he hit my kid and wouldn't respect my wishes to not speak to my one parent who psychologically tortured me for decades. Story 70. I grew up with a single mom who worked a lot of long hours, so my sisters and I were left to our own devices a lot. I was the youngest, so my older sisters were supposed to watch out for me, but they had a lot of after-school activities like sports, clubs, friends, etc., so I got left by myself a lot. My sisters decided it would be a good idea to tell me that if the police find out I'm home alone, they will come and arrest me. I spent years, like multiple years, hiding in our basement with all the blinds in the house closed, petrified that the police were going to come take me away. I would have full-on meltdowns if I saw a police car drive by our house and I was inconsolable. Now I'm an anxiety-ridden adult and it all makes sense, ha ha. Story 71. He was the favorite child and knew it. So aside from the usual stuff that accompanies that, there's a thing he did that made me jump from disliking him for being a git and straight to forever hating him. He would constantly blackmail me, threatening to out me to our mother. Then when I eventually did come out, threatened to tell her anything I did or make up crap about me that Mom would auto-believe. It never ended. I finally left home when he got picked up by the cops' ambulance when I was out and Mom was abroad, and I knew somehow everything would have been pinned on me. It was just easier to leave at midnight the next day than deal with it anymore. Story 72. Got hooked on meth and broke into my apartment and stole what I just spent 6 months saving for. Got hooked on some substances and I was forced to adopt their children. Got hooked on pills and decide to tell anyone who will listen how bad of a person I am and constantly shame me and verbally abuse me. I only stick around because I love their children and try to give them a better life. Story 73. Well, the latest is he got kicked out of my mom's house for doing substances and stealing crap again. Ended up starting a fire in a tire/brake/muffler place. Probably ducked up on this crap and, of course, in possession. This is after having been homeless and having his GFOD next to him in bed and have all his teeth removed at 34 because of met mouth. Don't look it up. Hopefully he's going away for a while and can get cleaned up and released in time to realize he can do something with his life. It all stems from abandonment issues and severe anxiety that was never diagnosed until it was too late. Story 74. Got high as duck on powder, then drunk at the same time and tried to hit my elderly and disabled mother. Only reason he didn't was because I saw the hit coming and was able to get in front of my mom in time. I wrestled him to the ground and pinned him while he was screaming about how he couldn't wait to watch us all die and things of that nature. He also stole my mom's pain meds as frequently as he possibly could, even after she had major surgery. Story 75. When he was 12, taking a hatchet and destroying all of the bedroom doors in the house, and then threatening the other 4 of us, my parents, my sister, and I, saying he would kill us in our sleep. That was because my parents insisted that he dress appropriately for the weather. It was in the low teens with snow and a wind chill approaching 0. He wanted to wear a t-shirt and shorts in the snow and was stubborn enough where he would have done so to the point where he had frostbite. He hacked the doors up 2 days later. 2. When he was 16, he was in boarding school and put 5 other boys in the hospital. Their crime? One of them tried on his sunglasses without permission, and his friends laughed at him because the guy who tried them on apparently looked ridiculous. Story 76. In point form, in no particular order, please excuse spelling mistakes, currently drunk, locked me in closets whenever he had to watch me, duct tapes me into the net so him and his friends could practice slap shots with frozen tennis balls, dislocated my shoulders multiple times to make sure I wouldn't say anything, assaulted me, dragged me behind his first car down the alley, forced me to eat rotten food, like with maggots and all. I'm terrified of moths, caught a bunch of them, shoved me in the closet, and released them all many more. But man, I can't right now. Most ducked up part is he's now a successful safety systems designer with a family. My family is super proud of him, and I'm the black sheep loser in his 30s. Like, the hell? Maybe all the trauma didn't give me much of a chance? Story 77. I'm disabled, and my sister beat the crap out of me when I was 2 on Halloween because I was getting more attention than her. She's also pushed me down the stairs when I had broken both my legs in 2nd grade and left me there for 7 hours. She's also put weapons in my backpack for school. Except I get in trouble and beated my in the stomach with a knife because I wouldn't get her a bag of chips. Story 78. My older brother systematically tortured me, verbally abused me, and manipulated my parents, or they didn't care, into abusing and neglecting me as well, until I turned 18 and left. I had stress-induced asthma, TMJ dysfunction, depression, anxiety, and still suffer from something called complex PTSD. He absolutely lacked empathy, making him technically a sociopath. He abused me as much as he could get away with it. The worst part of it all is how I'm perceived as the bad one in the family because I'm the only one verbalizing it all and trying to bring it to light. Don't worry, the cycle continues with the 3 kids he treats just as badly. Story 79. It's pretty tame compared to a lot of the other stories, but he jumped on my head. We're in the schoolyard during recess. I was running away from him. I don't really remember why, but it was probably because he wanted to hit me. I ran over some dark ice and fell. I hit my head and became disoriented. People saw him reach me, jump in the air, bend his legs, and both his knees landed on my head while I was still lying on the ground. I could have died or become a vegetable. I blame him for all the headaches, migraines I've had since. More than 20 years later, he doesn't remember it. My parents don't even remember it. I also suffer from PTSD and insomnia because of him. Story 80. Baseball bat to my face. Sat on my head till I passed out. Tried to stab me with shears, verbally and emotionally abused me nonstop for years. And that was just one of my brothers, the youngest of my 4 older brothers. Another one of my brothers, the oldest, beat me with some kind of toy doll that was really hard. Locked me in my closet for entire days at a time, only to taunt me from outside the closet every so often, and also verbally and emotionally abused me for years. My oldest brother eventually found Jesus, tells everyone he's a prophet, loves Trump, and is a cultist. Story 81. Less than a month ago, she stole 3,600 pounds from my mother to buy useless crap. She then acted as the victim and told my mom that she should have told her that she wasn't allowed to use her card without her consent. My mom placed safety features on her card. For example, she would now get a notification for each and every transaction that happens on her card. I kid you not. An hour after their conversation, my mom got notified by her bank that someone used her card to buy something worth 50 pounds. It was my sister. This time she said it was an accident. How does someone accidentally put in someone else's bank details? My sister definitely has an online shopping addiction, and that isn't even the worst thing about her. Story 82. My husband's brother tried to kidnap my oldest twice. He also sold substances from his parents' house, brought in multiple addict friends to freeload off of and outright steal from my in-laws. My in-laws wondered why I mostly kept my youngest child away from them. Story 83. My little brother was a terror as a kid. One Christmas, he bit me so hard. Another time, he tried to beat my face in with a piece of firewood, and he threw a wrench at my head. He also dumped piss all over me. Fortunately, my mother bent over backward to get him professional help, and he grew up to be a mere hole instead of a violent criminal.